Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And can I just start by thanking the IHF and especially Dr. Berger for inviting me, despite the fact that I have no expertise in urban planning in Iran. I've lived there, I know about it, but I cannot claim at all that I know the history of urban planning in the same way that I'm sure many esteemed colleagues here in the room know about it. So my talk is going to be a bit more general, maybe with some references to some examples in Iran, which I have used other people's work actually to do so. Well, I think it's already been said that cities have always been planned to a greater or lesser extent. The making of Persepolis or the Great Wall of China is nothing short of engaging in acts of urban planning. Even the most organically evolved cities have been shaped by some preconceived planning by individuals or institutions. So it's very difficult, because my talk is about planned city, but it's very difficult to draw a sharp line between planned and unplanned cities. Nevertheless, a distinction can be made between cities that have emerged almost spontaneously and evolved almost organically, and those that have been created by planners almost from scratch and built on a clear site or a blank canvas. Christopher Alexander called the former natural cities, using examples such as Siena, Kyoto, and in fact Manhattan. And the latter, artificial cities, using examples such as Chandigarh and British New Towns. This is a picture of Milton Keynes. I'm going to talk about this second category, while acknowledging that even the most rigidly planned cities are not immune to adaptability and self-organization. I will focus on three influential models of visionary planned city. Garden city, you heard something just very from Dr. Berger. Functional city and eco-city. All three are products of their time, in the sense that they reflect and reinforce the broader context which gave rise to them. And all three are examples of modern urban planning. But it's worth reiterating that planning for the ideal city has a long history, going back to Plato's description of city-state in the Republic and Aristotle's vision of the polis in the Politics. But it was after the 18th century and the Enlightenment project that prediction and planning for the future, became the antidote to future uncertainties and the insurance against its contingencies. But it wasn't until the 19th century when modern city planning became widespread, and often as a direct response to the rapid urbanization in industrial countries and its associated public health and social problems. In Britain, which I know more than I know about Iran, I suppose, industrial philanthropists were among the first to respond to building what is known as model towns for their factory workers, and often outside the large crowded cities, towns such as New Lanark, Saltaire, or Bourneville or Port Sunlight. But visionary idealism were given a real boost by the Garden City movement, a brainchild of Ebenezer Howard, who ironically was neither a planner nor an architect, but a shorthand writer. Born in London, he experienced a metropolis deeply entrenched in pollution, congestion, overcrowding, and social dislocation. His response to this problem, which was influenced by utopian novelists and radical reformists of the time, was an ideal garden city that combined the best of the city life with the best of the rural life, as depicted in his famous three-magnet diagram. I think in planning circle is probably the most shown slide or diagram that I know of. Key feature of his garden city was a permanent green belt, which would neatly separate the city from its surrounding countryside. Howard's vision was driven by socially progressive ideas and a desire to create a cooperative Commonwealth alternative to the growing capitalist cities of the early 20th century. His planned city was in fact a social city, where residents were to own the land in perpetuity and benefit collectively from its rising value. However, his socially progressive message was somewhat lost right from the beginning when he changed the title of his book. The new title, Garden Cities of Tomorrow, the one that we know, of course was more catching title, but as late Peter Hall argued, it diverted people from the truly radical character of the message and demoting him, I'm quoting Peter Hall, demoting him from social visionary into physical planner. Howard lived to see his vision being materialized in places like Lichfield and Welling Garden City, maybe dull, but still sought after places for people to live there. His followers and members of the Garden City Association spread his idea across Europe, America, and much of the rest of the world. In England, his Greenbelt idea, which was later adopted in Abercrombie's Greater London Plan, is a lasting legacy of his vision. The Garden City principle guided the planning of the new town, British new towns, and has remained influential to date in initiatives such as New Urbanism in America. It also informed Iran's planning responses to the post-war housing crisis, especially two major new towns which were built in the 1950s in Tehran. One is Narmak in the northeast of the city, and the other one is Naziabad in the south. I know, and we heard it today, that Dr. Berbers has suggested that the planning concept of chahar-bagh, which underpins Shah-Abbas' vision for Isfahan, is indeed a 16th century example of the Garden City principle. I agree with that, and it's true in terms of the physical form of the city and the blending of green spaces into the urban fabric. But chahar-bagh lacks the social reformist ideal that guided Howard's vision. Iran's 20th century urban planning was primarily influenced by modernist ideas and by modernism and its ideal functional city. Functional city originated in the Charter of Athens, a modernist manifesto formulated by a group of avant-garde architects and intellectuals in their 1933 Siam Congress. The charter itself was published 10 years later after heavy editing by Le Corbusier, the most celebrated founder of Siam. If Howard's response to the squalor of the 19th century cities was to bring the country into the town, Siam's vision was to embrace the efficiency of the industrialized and mechanized mass production and to use rational science to plan the city. Their famous motto, "Form follows function," advocated the primacy of function over aesthetics in architecture and the need for order to replace what they perceived as chaos in cities. Cities whose growth, they argued, suffered from absence of control. The Siam city would therefore be planned geometrically, orderly, rationally, and according to neatly classified and separated functions. Le Corbusier believed that the 20th century cities were dying because they were not constructed geometrically. He dedicated his famous Radiant City text to authority. Born in Switzerland, in a family of watchmakers, and lived in Paris, Le Corbusier could not stand the chaos of the old Paris, which was left intact by Haussmann. So he devoted his professional life to place a Genevian-style order on cities so that everything would function like clockwork. Indicative of command and control mentality of modernist urban planning are his statements about a house being a machine to live in, and his call that the plan must rule, and he used capital letters. Indicative of the blank canvas approach to planning is his demand that we must build on a clear site. The Corbusian planned city was laid out in a symmetrical grid patterns with rows of identical and geometrical skyscrapers, all of which arranged to create a city made for speed. The functional city ideal traveled widely and left its mark on numerous towns and cities across the world, including Tehran, which at the time was experiencing a modernization process fueled by the growing oil revenues. Western-educated Iranian architects who considered their contemporary cities as dysfunctional initiated the construction of modern low-cost housing and new neighborhoods, of which chahar-bagh is probably one of the best-known examples. Built in 1946 in southeast Tehran for government employees, these 400 single-house units were arranged geometrically, benefiting from maximum sunshine, large green spaces, a tree-lined boulevard, and modern amenities and civic buildings. The project was motivated by social reformist ideals similar to those that underpin Charter of Athens. As you can see in this rather long statement by one of the founding members of the movement, suggesting, and I only read the bold bit, by constructing new neighborhoods and housing according to modern urbanism principle, we hope to create a spirit of health and joy. This clearly echoes the progressive, albeit naive, nature of the Charter of Athens, whose ideal Siam city was a city of salvation, a city that assured individual liberty and the benefit of collective action, a city in which the disposition of the land will satisfy the needs of the many as well as those of the individuals. However, unlike the socially progressive planning ideals of the Siam city, and contrary to Howard's communitarian vision, Le Corbusier's only built city, Chandigarh, was a planned social segregation, which kept the rich and the poor apart. But as often happens, over time, an unplanned city began to grow besides the planned one, in which the poor families lived their perceived unruly lives. Similar planned segregation was considered in the 1960s Comprehensive Plan for Tehran, in which 3 categories of housing areas were designed for low, medium, and high-income families in designated areas of the city. Finally, one cannot talk about modernist planning and Le Corbusier's legacy without mentioning his skyscrapers in the park, an idea that was taken up in often poorly constructed high-rise blocks around the world, with often socially disastrous consequences, which have led to demolition of some and unpopularity of others, especially in the UK. Their faith have become the symbol of modernist obsession with form and function, and ignorance of people's aspirations and ways of life. Both garden city and functional city planning were driven by a desire to improve urban life, yet based on naive assumptions that good rational planning could solve urban social problems, that modernist master planning could transform both the physical and the social fabrics of cities and create order. Today, we are witnessing another wave of visionary planned cities called eco-cities, which are motivated this time by environmentally sustainable and low-carbon living. Some are pure fantasies, such as this idea of self-sufficient island labeled lily pad, which would float on water to accommodate climate change refugees of up to 50,000 people. Others are more plausible experimentations, such as Norman Foster's planned Masdar City. Designed to be a carbon-neutral city, this ecotopia is ironically located in the oil-rich Abu Dhabi. Another example is planned city of Dongtan in Shanghai, which came to a halt due to political scandals and corruptions. A key difference between the utopianism of the 20th century planning and today's ecotopianism is that the latter is explicitly experimental and is based on a new conception of the city as a giant high-tech laboratory. Every movement of the residents and every function of the city are monitored by intrusive remote sensing devices. Big data is continuously collected, analyzed, and fed back to the drawing boards to find out how people react to the planned city. It's a big brother experiment at a larger scale, which has now spread to all major cities around the world. In a way, we are witnessing a new era of science in the city. To conclude, I'll be happy to hear that, we live our daily lives in planned city, visionary or otherwise. They both constrain and enable our actions, relationships, and aspirations. But no city stands still. Their forms, function, and meanings evolve all the time. In an environment which is defined by complexity and uncertainty. But this doesn't mean that planning for urban futures is condemned to solve yesterday's problems. Because uncertainty carries the seeds of innovation and creative imagination. But stripped of its social context and devoid of democratic processes, visionary urban planning risks creating undesirable social and physical consequences. The problem with modernist planning, for example, was not its visionary idealism, but its overconfidence in scientific master planning as a means of not just physical improvement, but also social engineering. This is why the history of planning is littered with the ruins of utopias that fail to acknowledge their wider social context. And many planned cities never made it beyond the drawing boards. Those that did mixed utopianism with social realism, as again the great Peter Hall reminded us, and left their marks on the urban landscape across the world, for better or for worse. Thank you.